Hey guys, it's Rachel. Today's video is going to be a story time. I'm going to be talking about crazy retail stories. When I was 16, I was hired on at Kroger, which is a grocery store, and I started off as a bagger and I worked my way up and became a cashier. And working at a grocery store, a lot of really crazy things happen that people don't really seem to notice, and it can be kind of funny. So today I'm going to be talking about a couple of those stories, and if you guys want to hear more, if you like this video, please give it a like and a subscribe. At Kroger, you can place these things called money orders, and there was this man that had came in and he wanted to send a money order somewhere for $1,200. He had came in, he was talking to one of the customer service representatives. He was like, hey, I need to send this money order. Since it was for such a big amount of money, he had to wait and they had to call somebody else, which is no big deal. That's what we're supposed to do. And he did not like that idea. He decided to flip out and started yelling at everybody there at the desk and got really loud, and he started to make a scene. And at the time, I was a cashier. I was doing my thing, just working with my customer, and he had came up to my lane, and I kid you not, he went from 0.2 to 100. He wasn't angry, but I don't know how to explain it. He kind of had like those crazy eyes, and he looked at me and he was like, "Can I bag for you?" And I looked at him and I was like, I mean, if you really want to, I'm not gonna stop you. And he's like, okay, I'd love to bag for you. And he went on this whole tangent about how he used to work in a grocery store and how he loved being a bagger. And I mean, it's really not all that great, so I didn't really know where he was coming from. And all of a sudden, he was in the middle of bagging, and then he just left. He walked away, and they were still in the process of doing his money order, and he had got a bottle of alcohol. And at the time, still not old enough to ring alcohol myself, and he came up, and I was like, okay, we're gonna have to wait because I have to get someone here to scan this, and I had paged over the intercom. And he got so up in my face. He was like, are you kidding me? You cannot scan liquor? I was like, no, I'm only 17. And he got probably like this close to my face. He was practically spitting in my face, yelling at me how dumb it was that I couldn't scan liquor, and made me very uncomfortable. And he had went to go back. He didn't buy the alcohol. He just kind of left it on my lane, and he walked back over to the customer service desk. And one of the customer service workers, his name was Brandon, he was there. The man had walked up to Brandon. He was like, so is my money order done yet? Like, can I go? And Brandon's like, no, we have to call this number because it's such a large amount. It might take a couple hours. And the dude completely flipped shit. He was like walking around, he was yelling at customers, yelling at workers. He didn't know how to keep composure, which was even scarier. And then eventually he just kind of stormed out, and everyone just kind of stood there like, okay. So the next story, I was still a cashier at the time, and there was this man that had came through, and he was buying cans of formula for his son or daughter or whatever, and he probably had like 30 or so cans. And sometimes customers will get these vouchers that give you like so much money off, like $5 off per can. And with these vouchers, you can only use one per order. You can't use more than one. I had rang up all of his cans before he had given me anything, so I had no idea about these vouchers. And I scanned everything, and I was like, okay, your total's this. And he shoved vouchers in my face, and he's like, I want to use all these. And I was looking at him, and I was like, okay, you can only use one per order. And he took that as he could only get one. He couldn't get any of the other cans, that he could only buy one. And he started to raise his voice, and he's like, so I can't get anything? I was like, no, like you can get these cans, but we have to do separate orders. And as soon as I had said that, the lady that was behind him had looked at me. She was in the process of putting her items up. She didn't have very many up there yet. She looks at me when I'm in the middle of talking to this dude, and she's like, how many orders will I have to wait through? And I said, well, 20, but they're not going to be that long. she had cut me off in the middle of my sentence, and she's like, I came here for quick service. I do not deserve to wait this long because you guys are being slow. And at this point in time, I had two people yelling at me. I was trying to talk to this dude and tell him that he could use his little coupon things as long as it was in different orders. And then I had this lady yelling at me that it was going to take too long. But I mean, if you're going to sit there and yell at me, it's going to take a whole lot longer than if you were just to be quiet. I turned my attention back to the guy who had all of the cans of formula. And I was like, okay, I can bring up one at a time. And he just flipped out. And he's like, no, I don't even care anymore. And everything was already all bagged. He pulled out of his car and he threw it all over the lane and made a total scene. And everyone just kind of stared at him. And I was like, oh, okay. And then one of the managers of my store noticed, and she walked over and she looks at me and she's like, what happened? And I kind of looked at her. I was like, just threw all of his cans of formula all over the place because I tried to tell him that he could only do one per order. And she's like, well, is he gone? I was like, yeah, he stormed out, left his cart, left everywhere where it was at. He didn't even take his little coupon thing. That was the best part. Like, you come in to save all this money, and then if you're gonna take anything, you take your coupons, and he left them there. And then there was another time I was supposed to open. So one morning I had come in at 7 and I was checking, and normally it's really slow in the morning. No one really comes. And there's this dude. He's maybe like in his early 20s maybe. He had came in with his friend. He ran into the store, kind of walking behind him, and this guy, he runs in and he just stops. And he looks at everyone that's there. His eyes are all bloodshot red. He's probably high on LSD. And he looks at me. I think there's 2 other people with me. He's like, do you guys have any more liquor? And I just kind of looked at him like, I don't think you really need any more liquor. You seem to be pretty good. And so I pointed him in the right direction. He sprinted over there and grabbed probably like 3 bottles of liquor to buy. And his friend is just kind of like lollygagging around, walking around with all the liquor. Came up, put it all in the belt. And he's like, okay, before I buy this, I need to use the restroom. And I was like, okay, you can go use the restroom. Sprinted all the way down to the restroom. For some reason, he didn't come back. But maybe like 30 minutes later, his friend ended up coming back to buy the alcohol that his friend had picked up. I don't know, it was just really weird. Every year on Halloween, we get to dress up, and as like within reason. I decided to dress up as Minnie Mouse. And I've been a big fan of Disney ever since I was little. My mom is a big fan of Disney. We have like a curio cabinet full of a bunch of like Disney knickknacks and stuff like that. When I was younger, I used to have Disney posters in my room. We are really big Disney fans. And so this year for Halloween, I had dressed up as Minnie Mouse. I had made myself this really cute tutu out of red tulle, and I had like hot glued white polka dots on it. It was really cute, and I wore Minnie ears. And I was checking, and people would refer to me as Minnie Mouse. This one really kind of creepy dude came up through my line, and he kind of reminded me of Hannibal Lecter from Silence of the Lambs. He didn't blink once. He looked at me in the middle of my order, and I was like, so how are you today? Trying to start conversation. He didn't say anything. He just kind of stared at me. He randomly asked me, he's like, do you like cats? And I looked at him, and I was like, yeah, I like cats. He looks at me again without blinking, and he says, do you have any cats? And I was like, yeah, I have 2 cats. Why? And he's like, oh, well, you look like the kind of person who would have a lot of cats. Like, what? Why would you say that? I just kind of like, I began to like, whenever I get really nervous and don't know what to say and things get really awkward, I just kind of, I began to laugh. I didn't know what to say, and he's like, have you ever had any more than 2 cats? At one point in time, I had 5 cats when I was younger because we rescued these cats from under my basement, or I mean under my porch outside, But I wasn't about to say that. I wasn't about to have him be like, you are going to be a crazy cat lady when you are older. I was not about to set myself up for that. And so I was just like, no, we've only had the 2 cats. And he's like, oh, well, I see that you could more than 2 cats in your future. I was like, oh, okay. And I just kind of proceeded on with my job. It was very awkward, very scary. I felt like he was out to get me. I don't even know. A couple months later, I used to work out in the fuel center. Our Kroger has a gas station where people can come and get gas and buy like food and drinks and whatever. For some reason, I came in for my shift and I walked in and I had said hello to the field manager at the time. His name is Marks. I was like, hey Marks, how's it going? And Marks turns around and he's like, terrible, absolutely terrible. And that was the first time I've ever seen him like not been having a good day at work. And I was like, oh, why? And he looks at me, he's like, says in the most serious, worrisome voice, he's like, Ace is down. And I was pretty new at this time. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what Ace was. I was like, what is this? Like, what's Ace? He's like, it's what makes the fuel center work. And I was like, so like, can we just like restart it? And he's like, well, we have, and we can't get into the register. We can't log in. We can't open the drawer. We can't scan things. We can't sell gas. Like you absolutely could not do jack whatever in the fuel center. Like it was completely shut down. Like it was eventually shut down. The only way that people could really buy something is if they filled up their car with gas and they paid with a card there. Like you couldn't prepay, you couldn't pay at the window, you couldn't pay with cash. You could only pay with your card at the pump. And so we repeatedly had to push people away and telling them that they couldn't buy anything. And people didn't seem to understand. We had signs up everywhere. We had this big sign on the glass window in the kiosk on the front where they could see in big bold letters that we could not sell any product. And they would come up and they would read it and they'd be like, so can I have a pack of Newports? And we would just be like, well, you can't. And they would get all, mad and they'd be like, well, why not? We would proceed then to say, well, we can't scan anything. And like, well, can't I just give you cash? And then Mark's have to come and be like, well, we can't even open the drawer, so we can't sell you any product. Eventually, we'd be locked at the kiosk, and me and Mark's had to walk around the perimeter of the gas station, like letting people know that if you wanted to buy gas, you could buy gas with your card at the pump. You couldn't buy anything else. You couldn't do lottery, couldn't do anything. Eventually, for some odd reason, there's probably like 10 pumps at our fuel center, and each pump had a different price that was different than the price on the sign. There was I think gas that day was like $2.10, and there was one pump that was selling it for $1.50, and really, really cheap prices. And so me and Mark didn't know whether or not we should shut off the pumps or whatever, because if you shut off the pumps, then the fire department comes. So we just kind of left it as is and told people hey, if you want to save money, go to pump number 5. It's selling it for $1.20. And they'd be like, oh, okay, this is great. And then all of the 5 managers that were inside our store that day, they had all come out at once, and they're like, so what's going on here? Why are you guys selling gas for so cheap? And we had told them, I didn't really know what to say. I was new, and so they had to tell them that Ace was down, and everything was just not working at all whatsoever. They're like, oh, okay, you need to get all of the caution cones out and all of the orange cones and put them in front of each pump so no one can come and get gas, because we cannot be selling gas for this cheap because we're going to lose money. And so I had walked into the store and got every, those wet floor cones and put them in front of the pump. Eventually we got calls from corporate telling us that we should not be doing what we're doing and that we needed to have the fuel center shut down temporarily. And so we had shut off all the pumps, turned off the signs, and we had to walk around. People would still try to come up and get gas, and they would be like, well, I only come here for my gas, and it's time for me to get gas, and I only have this one gift card that can only be used here to get gas. And we'd have to turn them away and be like, well, you can't get gas right now, we're shut down, we're having technical difficulties, and they still did not seem to get the picture. They would still try to pull up their car up to the pump, even though there was a cone right there. They would go right around it, and walk out and try to buy gas. And some people would blatantly ignore us, and they would look at us as soon as it stopped working, and they'd be like, why isn't this working? Me and Marks would look at them and say, well, we try to tell you that we're shut down right now, no one can get gas. People just didn't like that whatsoever. People would drive by, they'd drive really slow, and they'd roll down their window and be like, why are you guys shut down? And they continued to coast on the road, and we'd tell them, and they'd be like, this is so stupid, I hate this place, you guys are never put together, there's always some sort of problem. Just found every reason possible to criticize. And eventually they all left, and they're like, well, you should put a thing on the radio so everyone knows not to come here to get gas. Like, this is a one-time thing. We're not going to publicize it on the radio because, one, we will lose money and no one will come to our gas station anymore, and this never happens. It's not that big of a deal. We're probably only shut down for a couple hours. And it wasn't even that bad, but people, they took it from 0 to 100 and ran with it and found every way possible to criticize it, and it was just good. Eventually got put back up, and everyone was very relieved, and that's it for today's story time. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe and comment down below if you want to see any more future videos. Bye!